Baruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem. B'Shem Irgun Shir Torah, most especially I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir. I'd like to give a shekayach to Anonymous for sponsoring tonight's shir. It's a schus v'atzlacha b'chol onyonim. I'd like to give a shekayach to Mr. and Mrs. Alti Freilich for sponsoring tonight's shir. To have the great schus of sponsoring a shir or putting an ad in the dinner journal for next Wednesday's annual dinner of Irgun Shir Torah. You can call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com to have this great schus of Avodas HaTorah, the Rabbim, throughout the year worldwide. Tonight we have the cover to have us once again Rabbi Paysach Krohn, Shlita, noted speaker and author, speaking on the topic of bringing out the best in yourself. It's my cover to call on Rabbi Krohn for tonight's Rasha.
We come here tonight, Rosh Chodesh Elul, and of course Rosh Chodesh Elul is a time of Cheshbon HaNefesh. And the first thing that comes to mind when I come to this Heilige Beis Medrash is that Irgun Shir Torah has been able to use the Boston Beis Medrash. This is now the 27th year. And we know that just 2.5 months ago, Rav Pinchas Horowitz, the Boston Rebbe Nebuch, was nifter. I just want to say just something personal. I remember him when he was a young boy. We were classmates in Tervadas. And the thing that always impressed me about him was that here was a person who was a Benon Shel Gedolim. There was nobody else in our class that came from a Rebbeisha family. And yet, he made everybody feel special. He never felt that he was more important than anybody else. And if you didn't know that he was from the Bostoner family, from his Hanhogas, you certainly wouldn't figure it out, because he was humble and he was nice and he was pleasant, and he was that way throughout his life. Anytime I ever had a bris here or when he was there, it was always with the Gresta Derech Eretz and the Gresta friendship. So we certainly hope that tonight's shir should be a schus for his Heilige Neshama. We know today that there was a Levaya. I'm sure that most of you know the Racham Tzrifka Rebbe Zechat Tzadik V'Kodesh Lovracha, who was a Kodesh V'Tor. Between Borough Park and Monsey, there must have been 50,000 people that were at the Levayas that were today. And I understand that in that Chasidus, there's no Hespedim. There's only one kapitel of Tillim that is said. So I have no doubt that in the next weeks, that so much will be written, and it's something that we should read and also be inspired by. It's just one more person that passed away recently, a Rabbi Mitnick, who always used to come to the shiurim here as a person, an Adam Godel Ad Miyoid, not only in his midas and in his learning, and he was a Rebbe for so many years. And he was one of these type of people that when I finished speaking, by the time I got back to Queens, he was already on the phone telling me how much he enjoyed and what Verta he appreciated. So, these are three people that certainly will be missed in Klal Yisrael. And certainly on a night of Rosh Chodesh Elul, it's something to think about what we have to become and how we have to strive to be great and to bring out our best. And so I would like to begin by telling you a very interesting insight that the Baba Rebbe once said. And he said, we know that Elul, everybody says, Ani l'doidi v'doidi li, that's how it's written in Chazal. But the Baba Rebbe came up with something interesting, unusual. He said, Echad la'oila ve'echad l'chatos. Echad la'oila ve'echad l'chatos. And he explained what it means. There are some people that look back at the previous year and they say, I davened very well. I came to Minyan all the time. I had Sidorim and learning. I was nice to my family and I was good to everybody. So he looks back and he says, he had a good year. So we say to that person, Eina Chanami, that was wonderful. But now, Oila, you got to go even higher. A person should never rest on his laurels. Thank you very much. A person should never rest on his laurels. Oh, wow. A person should never rest on his laurels and be satisfied on the level that he's at. But Echad La'oila, you should always go higher. And then, of course, there's Echad L'chatas. That people who look back at the previous year and say, maybe I didn't daven as well as I should have. Maybe I didn't have the Siddurim in learning as much as I should have. And maybe I wasn't as friendly, I didn't give the right amount of tzedakah. So that's a person who looks back at the past year and says, Echad lachatas. So tonight is a great night to talk about this topic, bringing out the best in ourselves, because whether you're an Echad la'olah person or Echad lachatas person, and most of us are someplace in between, now's the time to talk about what we should do and how we bring out the best in ourselves. And that's something that every person has to do every waking moment. Every moment that you're alive, you have to bring out the best in yourself, in your midos, and ben adam l'makam, and ben adam l'chaveroi. So I want to share with you a very interesting Zohar HaKodesh. And the Zohar HaKodesh is in Shir HaShirim, and if you take a look at it, you'll see he has a very interesting Einfall, Tov Reish Nun Ches, Shir HaShirim, Tov Reish Nun Ches, in the Zohar HaKodesh, page 74, if you want to look it up. And he says that the word Yisrael, which of course means Klal Yisrael, you know what it stands for? Yesh, Shishim, Ribui, Oisios, La Torah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. Why dafka 600,000? Because we know there were 600,000 men that left Mitzrayim. Now really, there were millions of people that left Mitzrayim, if you consider the women and the children. But as far as men are concerned, there were 600,000. So every person that left Mitzrayim has a letter that's theirs in the Torah. Yesh Shishim Ribui Oisios La Torah. There were 600,000 men, 600,000 letters. Everyone has a letter in the Torah. And all of us who are descendants of those 600,000, that letter is ours. The letter that our ancestor had in Mitzrayim, that's passed down to us. So we each have a letter in the Sefer Torah that's ours. So when I first saw that Zohar Chodesh in Shir HaShirim, I thought of 3 lessons that we could learn from that. The first lesson is as follows. Imagine that you're laying on Shabbos, and Chas v'Shalom, there's one letter missing in the Sefer Torah. Now there's hundreds of thousands that are perfect, and they're there, but there's one letter missing. What do you have to do? You have to close the Sefer Torah, you have to take out another one. Because if one letter is missing, that whole Sefer Torah is flawed. And if that's the case, to me it means that if there's one Yid out there, whether he's in Chile, in Mexico, in Gibraltar, or wherever he may be, in Muncie, and Monroe, and Williamsburg, and Flatbush, and in Queens, if there's one Yid out there that's not fulfilling his tafkid of what a Yid is supposed to be, then it's a kash on all of us. Kiruv is not only for Eish HaTorah, nor Sameach, and Hashivenu, and all the wonderful Kiruv organizations. Every one of us has relatives that are not from. And every one of us has neighbors that are not from, and every one of us works with people that are not from and have not yet fulfilled their tafkid. So that's the letter that's missing. So then it's a kasha on all of us. So if one letter is missing, and the Sefer Torah is flawed, you can't use it, so that's a kasha on all of us. If we know Yidden, that we're not trying to be Makarav and not trying to bring out, that they should live up to what their potential could be, that's one lesson. The second lesson, in the Torah, no 2 letters can touch. No 2 letters can overlap. In other words, every letter has its own chashivas. Every letter has its own importance, and every person is supposed to look at himself in that way, that they have their own importance. Now, when you go to big communities, whether it's in Brooklyn, Los Angeles, Chicago, or Yerushalayim, a person could feel, listen, the Eibusher doesn't need me. Look at all these Yidden, all these wonderful Yidden that are out there. And the Torah says, no 2 people overlap. Everybody has their own mindset. Everybody has their own hashkafas and their own talents. So no 2 people overlap. That's the second thing. Everybody's important. And the third lesson to me is, it's interesting that in English, you have words that are one letter. I go, I do, I think, a book, a microphone, a glass of water. There's not one word in the whole Sefer Torah that is only one letter. And don't tell me Hal Hashem Tikmul Uzois, because that's not really one word. But the idea is, in other words, we can't do it alone. Every one of us is chashiv. Hashem needs every single one of us, but you can't accomplish alone. you need somebody else. You need somebody in Klal Yisrael. And that's the lesson from the Zohar. Every Yid is important. If one Yid out there is not fulfilling a tafkid, it's a kasha on all of us. Every Yid is important. No two overlap. Everybody has their own mindset. And the third thing, of course, is that we can't do it alone. So I want to share with you something that somebody told me on my birthday a number of years ago. Now, I have the greatest birthday in the world because everybody celebrates it. It's Tu B'Shvat. So everybody's happy on Tu B'Shvat. Now, somebody called me on my birthday, and I want to tell you, it made such a rosham on me, but the truth is, every single one of you, and everybody that's watching tonight, every one of you can think about yourself in that same way. And what the person said to me was, the day you were born, that was the day Hashem decided that the world can no longer exist without you. The day you were born, that was the day that Hashem decided the world can no longer exist without you. That means each one of us has a tafkid. Hashem created us because we're different than anybody else. No two people are the same, even identical twins. No two people are the same. So every one of us, Hashem needs us. And Hashem needs us to fulfill our potential and to bring out the best that we can. Now I want to tell you something very interesting. Over the years, I had the opportunity to get to know a very special Rebbetzin. All of you know her name, and that was Rebbetzin Esther Youngreis, Allah Shalom. She was a person that had gone through difficult times in life, and she always spoke about the Holocaust. She spoke about her grandparents, and she spoke about her parents, and she was a very accomplished person. But what most people don't know is that she relied totally, everything that she did, she relied on her husband. And he was the one who kind of gave her all the advice and all the permission to do all the things that she did. So as much as she was a public persona, he was private. But she relied on him totally. And she told me that when he died, she thought, that's it, life is over. She cannot exist. How in the world is she possibly going to go on without her husband, who she was so close to and so dependent on? A few weeks after he died, his daughter, their daughter, Mrs. Slavy Wolf, she found a index card in one of his svarim. She read the card, and she brought it to her mother, and Rebbetzin Youngreis told me that she was positive, there was no doubt, that her husband had left that card, that someday she should find it and read it, and be able to go on with life. So I want to read to you what was on that card, and I'm going to repeat it twice. What Rabbi Meshulam Youngreis wrote on that card was like this: a long life is not good enough. A good life is long enough. A long life is not good enough. Just because somebody lives 70, 80, 90 years old, and if they accomplish nothing, that's not good enough. That's not what you came to the world for. But a good life is long enough. And I tell you that I get tremendous chizuk when I hear that expression, because my father, Shalom, passed away at 47. We're going to talk about these things in a moment, about when people die. But the idea was that he had an accomplished life. An accomplished life, a good life, is long enough. So I want to tell you something, that she wrote a book afterwards, Rebbetzin Youngreis, and she called it Life is a Test. And in there she wrote as follows, based on this card: the goodness cannot be measured by the length of our years, but how we live those years. The goodness is not about what we amass, but what we give. It's not about having more, but being more. For in the end, our lives are judged not by the businesses or the houses or the portfolios we built, but by the lives we touched and made better. It's not about the houses, and it's not about the money, and it's not about the businesses. It's about how you affected another Yid. That's really what it's all about. So I'll tell you something very interesting. How can we manage to do this? You know, the second Ger Rebbe, the Sfas Emes, lived Nebuch a short life. He lived only 58 years old. He was born in 1847 and he died in 1905. And at his Levaya, there was an amazing conversation that took place between his grandson, who would be the next Ger Rebbe, the Imre Emes, and the Imrei Emes' younger brother, Rabbi Tzalel. The Imrei Emes said to his brother, Rabbi Tzalel, at least our father had Arichas Yomim. So his brother said to him, what are you talking about? Arichas Yomim means length of days. He didn't live a long time. He only lived 58. Listen to what he said. He said, I didn't say that our father had Arichas Shonim. I said our father had Arichas Yomim. There's a tremendous difference between Arichas Shonim and Arichas Yomim. No one here, and no one watching, and no one in the world can guarantee for themselves Arichas Shonim. Nobody knows what tomorrow brings. But every single one of us can guarantee in our lives Arichas Yomim. Having length of days, making every day count. We can guarantee Arichas Yomim. And that's what the Imrei Emes was saying about the Sfas Emes. He made every day count. He accomplished every single day. He accomplished every single day. That's why he was Zeicha to have what his grandson called Arichas Yomim. It's true. Many people don't have Arichas Shonim. But that's not what life is all about. It's not about living to be 90 and 95. It's living the type of life that we're Zeicha to have Arichas Yomim. And you know how you have Arichas Yomim? Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, the Mira Mashgiach, once said a gewaldige point. And I remember that when we went to Mir, and I was at his cave, I repeated it. And every time we go with Morty Melman, who takes us to Mount Judah, and we go in Elul, you're all invited to come. And it's a tremendous hisayrus to go. We go to Rav Pam, to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, to Rav Henach, and we go to Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz's wife. She's buried right next to the Chavetz Chaim's second wife. And I always tell over what Rabbi Yerucham said. As important as it is to know your faults, to know what you have to fix, it's even more important to know your milas, to know what you could accomplish. Again, all of us have to know what our faults are, to know what we have to fix. But it's even more important to know your milas, to know what you could accomplish. So I want to share with you a magnificent story. We know that today in Klal Yisrael there are many, many wonderful Yiddish songwriters. And perhaps one of the best is a fellow by the name of A.B. Rottenberg. I happen to be very close to him. He grew up in Kew Gardens. I was his Pirchei leader. Today he's in Toronto. And he wrote a song recently about Zechariah Wallerstein, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. And he sings it together with Shuli Lemmer. And I'm telling you, it is literally impossible to listen to that song without crying. The song is called The Butterfly. And he has a line in that song that's worth the whole song itself. And the line is like this: you can fly and you can soar if you'll only open the door. You can fly and you can soar if you'll only open the door. And what that means is that we all have kishroinus. We can all be great. Every one of us here can be great. But sometimes we just don't open the door. The talent is there, but we just let it lay and we don't open the door, and therefore you don't soar. And I want to give you a beautiful, beautiful example. A couple years ago, I got a call. One late night, there was a couple on the phone, and they started talking, and they said, Rabbi Krohn, we need chizuk. We're very frightened. I said, what are you frightened? What's going on? And she said, the woman started talking, she said, I'm expecting a baby in 2 weeks, and we're very afraid. I said, what are you afraid of? I mean, that's one of the happiest moments in life for a woman, that she's able to have a child. And then she starts crying and she can't talk anymore. And her husband continues. He said, last year we were also expecting a baby. And we went to the hospital Friday afternoon, and everybody was positive. Everything was going to be perfect. And Friday night, the baby was born, not alive. It was called a stillborn. And we were so devastated. We cried a whole night. And the doctors were shocked. They couldn't believe it. They thought everything was perfect. The nurses, All the doctors that we had throughout the 9 months, everybody was so positive that everything was going to be perfect. And now we're worried. That's why we need chizuk, that it shouldn't happen again. Now, I am positive that I'm not the only one that they called. I'm sure that they called other people as well to get chizuk. But I said to them, I want to tell you what to do. And I'm telling you, if you do what I'm about to tell you, you'll see in 2 weeks the baby's going to be born and everything's going to be fine. I said, take out your tillums. I wanted you to show you something. Each one, take out your own tillum. I want you to look at 2 parakim, Kuf Chav Zayin and Kuf Chav Ches. If any of you have a siddur or a tillum in front of you, you'll see in a moment why I'm referring to that. Any Art Scroll siddur has the tillum in the back. Take a look at Kuf Chav Zayin and Kuf Chav Ches. And you're going to notice something very, very interesting. In Kuf Chav Zayin, Pasuk Dalet, it says, Chechitzim biyad gibor, like arrows in the hand of a strong man, Kain b'nei hana'urim. That's what children are all about. In other words, just like somebody who shoots an arrow, he stands here, but he shoots the arrow and it goes far and accomplishes far away. That's the same thing with children. You raise children in one area, but then they grow up and they go far and they could accomplish. Kichitzim b'yad gibor kain b'nei hana'urim. And the next pasuk says, Hinei nachlas Hashem bonim. The heritage of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is children, sochar pri haboten. And then I told them, take a look at Kuf Chav Ches. Eshtecha kegefen peiria. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine, b'yarkasei beisecha, in the inner chambers of your home. Banecha, your children will be keshesile zeisim, like olive sprouts. Olives are fresh and vibrant throughout the year. And your children, that's the bracha that David HaMelech gives, your children will be keshesile zeisim sovev l'shulchanecha, always alive, always lebedik, vibrant and encouraging and wonderful. I said, both of you, every day say both of these parakim, Kuf Chav Zayin and Kuf Chav Ches. Don't tell anybody that I told you to do this. You just do it, and I'm telling you, in 2 weeks, you'll see the baby will be born and everything's going to be fine. Fine. 2 weeks later, on a Motzei Shabbos, the guy calls me and he says, Rabbi Krohn, the second he said Rabbi Krohn, the way he said it, you could tell when the guy's happy, and you knew that was good news. And he says, Baruch Hashem, we had a baby, and it's wonderful. We had a little girl. Now, I'm a male. I was gonna tell him you should have had a boy, but I didn't say that. I controlled myself. But whatever. But he had a baby girl, and of course, he was very happy, and he was thrilled, and it was wonderful. And I wished him mazel tov and gave him a bracha and all that. And I was already holding the phone. I was going to hang up the phone. And he says, wait, Rabbi Krohn, I got to tell you something. I want to tell you a story that I didn't tell you when I spoke to you 2 weeks ago. He said, remember I told you that the baby was born not alive Friday night? And we cried a whole night. And Shabbos morning, we were still crying. And this was right outside Deal, New Jersey, and I knew there was a shul down the block from the hospital. So I said to my wife, I want to go daven. It's Shabbos, I want to daven in shul Shabbos morning. But by the time I was able to leave the hospital, by the time I came to shul, it was Kriyas HaTorah. And I walk in, he says, imagine this. I'm coming from a hospital, from such a terrible tragedy, and I walk in, and Yaakov Choueki, the famous singer, who everybody loves, he's such a nice guy. He just had a baby girl, and he's getting an aliyah, and they're singing Siman Tov and Mazel Tov, and that's what I walk into. From that low point in my life, I'm walking in, and they're singing Siman Tov and Mazel Tov for this wonderful guy who had a baby girl. And they announced that there's going to be a big kiddush right after davening. And of course, I went over to him and I said, Mazel Tov. And then by the Kiddush, I went over to him and I said, do you mind if I talk to you privately? I just have to talk to you privately after the Kiddush. And he said, yeah, for sure, I'll wait for you, it's no problem. So I had to wait until everybody left the shul, and we were private. He tells me and Yaakov Choueki. He said, I went over to him and I said to him, my wife asked me that I should ask you a favor. We just had a terrible tragedy. We thought we were going to have a healthy baby, and Nebuch, the baby passed away. Baby wasn't born alive. And we want to cry. We have to get it out of our system. And we know that you sing a song, Mama Rachel Cry. would it be okay with you if we came from the hospital, and because we're leaving tonight, and we'll come to your house and just sing that song so that my wife and I could just cry because we just got to get it out of our system? And Yaakov Chwaki said, of course you should come. I'll wait for you past midnight, whenever you come. Don't rush, I'll be there. I just want to read you one of the refrains of the song. Mama Rachel, cry for us again. Won't you shed a tear for your dear children? If you raise your sweet voice now as then, the day will come. He said, I want you to know that not only did we come to his house after the hospital, he sang the song for us, and he sang the song Rachem, which is a famous song that he sings, also very moving, very compelling, tragic song. He gave us CDs, he spent time with us, he gave us chizuk. He was just incredible. You know, at that time, after I heard the story, at that time, what I was doing, there's a wonderful yeshiva in Far Rockaway, Rabbi Groner has a yeshiva, and what that yeshiva does is they send out many, many recordings every single day on different topics. They send out on Hashkafa, on Halacha, Mishnayos, Gemara, whatever. And Rabbi Groner had asked me that I should make recordings about Chesed. And so I was doing it 3 times a week. I would tell various stories about Chesed. And I thought at that moment that would be a great story to tell about Yaakov Chwaki. Here, the singer, everybody, the whole world knows him. And here he spends time with a couple, he doesn't even know them. And this guy, you know, concerts all over the world. And he's taking this talent that he has, and he's giving his heart to these people and singing for them, for 2 people who just had a tragedy. So I call him up, and I say, Yaakov, I happen to know who he is, and was somewhat friendly. So I said, you know, I just heard this story that what you did for that couple, I would like to tell this story on a recording. He says, Rabbi Krohn, please don't tell the story. I said, why not? He said, because you know why I do these things? Because like this, I'll get schar in the olam ha'emes. But I'm afraid that if you tell the story, I'm going to get less schar, I get less reward in the olam ha'emes. I said to him, Yaakov, you're a bigger tzaddik than I thought you were. I said, I want to tell you something. Why do you do what you do? You're not the first one to do this. There are singers older than you who have been doing it for years. Mordechai Ben David, Avram Fried, Shlomi Dax, these guys, they go to hospitals. They go to homes with their children that are nebach, incapacitated and challenged. And they go and they sing for them. You learned it from them. If you let me tell the story and eventually write the story, people will learn from you and you'll get much more schar in the olam ha'emes. He says, Rabbi Krohn, you really believe that? I said, of course I believe it. He said, okay, you could tell the story. And that's why I'm telling the story. And that's why I wrote the story in a book called The Glittering World of Chesed. Here's a man, he could fly and he could soar. You know why? Because he opened the door. He opened the door to this couple. What would other people say? Look, I'm busy. You know, this is his talent. I don't have to tell you what he gets paid for a concert in Yerushalayim or all over the world, wherever he goes. And here's it's a brach and a couple, and he's singing for them with his heart. That's what greatness is. That's bringing out the best. And I'll tell you something that is so important, is disregard public opinion. If you feel that you have an idea, or if you feel that you have a talent, don't listen to somebody who says, nah, you're never going to be successful. You'll never make it. It'll never happen. You know why? Because if you listen and you believe people who tell you that you won't accomplish something, you know something, you won't accomplish it. If you believe in yourself that you could accomplish it, you're going to accomplish it. But if you believe people who say you're not going to make it, don't listen to your brother-in-law, to your sister-in-law who you haven't spoken to in 8 months. And when they tell you, nah, your idea is nothing. Because all of us have heard ideas that were so good and people did something with them and we think, you know, I could have thought of that. Or I did think of that, but I didn't act on it. And so you can't be worried about what other people think. If you believe that you could accomplish something, you should go out and just accomplish it. Now, just by a raise of hands, and of course on the video that's being taken tonight. Most people won't be able to see how many raised hands, but I'm just curious because I want to tell you a great story. How many people ever heard the name Roger Bannister? Anybody here ever heard that name, Roger Bannister? One person. Oh, two people. Okay. Oh, somebody down there? A couple. Right. Okay, fine. Let me tell you who Roger Bannister was. Roger Bannister was a medical student in London, a Goyish fellow, a bright guy. He became a very good doctor. But on May 6, 1954, he was the first one since Sheshes Yimei Bereshis who ran the mile in less than 4 minutes. He ran the mile in 3 minutes and 59.4 seconds, and the world went crazy. No one ever, well, maybe Naphtali in the Torah, because the Torah tells us that he could run fast. So I'm sure that he could run the mile in less than 4 minutes. But nobody had ever run the mile in less than 4 minutes, and the world went meshugad. Every athlete, every paper, all over the world, they were writing, who could believe that some human being could run the mile in less than 4 minutes? Now hold on to your seatbelts, because you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. Within the next year, 37 people ran the mile in less than 4 minutes. How could that be? Nobody ever did it before. But then, hey, wait a second. If this medical student in London could do it, maybe I could also do it. And not only that, within the next year, after that, 100 people did it. Today, thousands have done it. Why? How did that happen? Because people ate Wheaties? I don't think so. Because people believed they could do it. And if you believed you could do it, you could do it. Roger Bannister believed he could do it, and then those 37 people in the next year, they felt, hey, if he could do it, I could do it. And they did it. So I want to tell you a great story. And I've told this story many times, but I love this story. When I was in the 9th grade in Torah Das, I had a teacher that we loved. His name was Hyman Ozer. He taught us English literature. One night, I was in the 9th grade. My mother came for PTA to find out how wonderful or how not wonderful her son is. Okay? And Mr. Hyman Ozer, you know, he spoke to my mother. And then, among other things, from the Luften, my mother never knew where he got this from or what. I still didn't understand it. He said to my mother, Mrs. Krohn, your son is a good writer, but he's never going to write a book. Now, in the 9th grade, my mother was not thinking that I would be writing books. I mean, we both loved writing, and that she was the one who taught me all, you know, about writing. And then she said to Mr. Ozer, why do you say my son won't write a book? Nah, he's too religious. Nobody's ever going to read what he writes. Okay, fine. Now, I guarantee you that by the time the next mother walked in for PTA, he surely forgot what he told my mother. But my mother didn't forget. She came home and told me, and I surely didn't forget. And almost 25 years later, when the Maggid Speaks came out, I went looking for Mr. Ozer. I wanted to see, is this guy still alive? The guy who said I could never write a book, or I wouldn't write a book. And sure enough, I found out that he was the head in HAFTA in Long Island, a modern day school. He's the head of the English department. And I decided I'm going to call him. I call him up. I say, Mr. Ozer, remember you taught in Torah Das many years ago? Oh, yeah, had some very good years there. I said, my name is Paysach Krohn. Do you remember me? He said, I think I might remember. I said, you know, I have a gift for you. He said, after 25 years, you have a gift for me? I said, yeah, when can I bring it? He said, you can bring it tomorrow. Fine. I drive out to Nassau County. I come to this big office. He's sitting behind this big desk, head of the English department. I show him our graduation book. Those of you who went to Torah Das, remember we used to write the scroll. That was the graduation book. I showed him the letter and how handsome he was when he wrote us the letter. I said, I want to tell you a little story. I know you're not going to remember this or believe this, but in the 9th grade, you once told my mother in PTA that I would never write a book. I just want to show you. I just wrote a book for a company called Art Scroll. It has 95 short stories. I'd like to give it to you, and I'm going to autograph it for you. Well, the guy went crazy. He could not believe it. He comes out of his desk. He puts his arm around me, says, come with me. Takes me into one of his classes. He says, boys, I want to show you a former student of mine. He just wrote a book, and I taught him how to write. Let him think that he taught me how to write. But the point is, imagine if when I first sat down to write that book, and I was writing the first story, and I would think, this is crazy. I'm going to write a book. My favorite teacher, Mr. Ozer, said I can't write a book, so what am I wasting my time? That would have been horrendous. That would have been horrendous. First of all, none of the books would have ever been done. And the truth is, all the speeches came only because of the books. Because somebody figured if the guy could write a story, maybe he could tell a story. And that's how it all got started. Okay, of course, with Rav Shalom Stradron, but the idea is, you can't believe someone who says you're not going to do something. If you believe you can do it, you're going to do it. And if you don't believe, you're not going to do it. And that's what you learned from Roger Bannister. Don't ever give up. You have a talent. We all have talent. Every single one of you here tonight and listening, men, women, and children, every one of us, the Eibishter created us to accomplish something. There are many, many accomplished people in this room tonight. Many people have done wonderful things. And there are many people who still have what to do. They haven't fulfilled their tafkid yet. And now's the time. Rosh Chodesh Elul, now's the time to make a cheshbon hanefesh. They should put you in this world for a reason. Not for what you could do for yourself, but what you could do for others. And I'll tell you a great story about somebody from Williamsburg, a Satmar Chassid. He told me the story himself. Shadar Refuah Shleima is an older person already. His name is Herschel Weber. Must be close to 90. That's right. Listen to this, what he told me. He told me he was learning in a kollel on Ross Street in Williamsburg. And he was walking down the stairs from the kollel. He was going home for lunch, and suddenly he sees a man walking on the side road, and the guy says, "Oh, I have a pain." And the guy collapses, and he falls on the floor. And Herschel told me he ran over to him to try to comfort him, try to help him, but he was not a doctor. And he tried to call an ambulance, doctors, somebody, whatever. And he told me he was standing by this guy. He saw the guy turn from white, turn blue, turn red, and he dropped dead right in front of him. And then when the police came, he overheard one officer say to the other, "If we would have got here 5 minutes ago, we could have saved him." And he told me he felt so bad that he decided, and I want to mention those two other people, it should be a schus for them, Herschel Kaff and a fellow Yoelish Gantz. One had a bakery, the other had a cleaning store, and they were able to get out if an emergency happened. They all took first aid, they all learned CPR, and they got little oxygen tanks. Little oxygen tanks, and anytime there was an emergency in Williamsburg, then they said, call Herschel Weber. So I just want to tell you something that I've never said before in public, because I just found out about it. I heard about it twice this past week, and most of you will know this name. It's incredible. He wanted to get a small oxygen tank, so he went to Park Surgical in Borough Park. Many of us know that store. And the guy behind the counter, he never saw Herschel Weber, and he wants to buy a little oxygen tank. He says, it costs money. He said, how much does it cost? Well, he had only half the money. He said, I can't sell it to you. He said, no, but I'm trying to save lives. He said, yeah, but I don't know you. How could I don't know you, I'm sorry. And just then, Yisrael Lefkowitz happened to walk into the store. And Yisrael Lefkowitz sees the owner of the store arguing with this Hasidic guy. He says, what's going on? So Herschel Weber says, I'm trying to buy an oxygen tank so I can help people. And the guy won't sell it to me because I don't have the money. He says, how much is it? He says, well, I only have half. And Yisrael Lefkowitz gave him the other half. And that's where the first oxygen tank came from Herschel Weber. Now listen to this. A couple weeks later, he tells me that there was an 80-year-old woman that was sleeping at night. She wakes up in the morning, and she wants to talk to her husband. He's not responding. So she shakes him, and he doesn't move. And she realizes, oh my gosh, he's dead. He must have died in his sleep. And she runs to the front window. She's yelling, somebody help, I think my husband died. And a whole crowd gathers, and somebody says, get Herschel Weber. And eventually he comes running with his little oxygen tank. And he comes upstairs, and he told me he saw the guy was died 5 hours ago. There's nothing to do. By now there was a big crowd outside. Listen to this. It's hard to believe this. He told me he was sitting with the almana, trying to comfort her. And then as he walks downstairs, he hears one yid say to the other, Dizestem Herschel, etim gehargit. You see that Herschel? He killed him. He told me he was so hurt. He could not. How could he say that about him? How could he say it about anybody? Of course, he understood what they meant. He realized that the guy probably thought that they called Herschel Weber to be a doctor, and he's not really a doctor, so he couldn't save the guy. He should have called the doctor right away and not try to help. But of course, it was too late by the time he got there. He told me he could not stop crying. And the next day he went to the Satmar Rebbe. Listen to this. And the Satmar Rebbe, he says to the Satmar Rebbe, Herschel Weber, he says, I believe that we should have an organization that in case there's a medical emergency, that there should be a group of people that will be able to help. And the Rebbe says, bring me a Shar Tshuva. Could you imagine? From Rabbeinu Yoina. And those of you who are taking notes, write this down and look it up. You will not believe it. And the Shar Tshuva, Shar Gimel, Ois Ayin Aleph. Shar Tshuva, Shar Gimel, Ois Ayin Aleph. Listen to what it says. V'toi v'nochain ma'oid. It's good and proper. Liyos b'chol ir ve'ir. There should be in every city misnadvim ba'am min hamaskilim. There should be intelligent volunteers. Liyos nechoinim u'muzumonim. They should be ready and prepared. L'chol devar hatzola. That was the language, and that's the language of the Shar Tshuva. Zok the Heilige Rebbe, start the organization and call it Hatzola. Every one of us here knows people that were helped by Hatzola. Some of us even know people whose lives were saved by Hatzola. How did it start? One guy. He opened the door. He could fly and he could soar. And he opened the door. What happens if you walk tonight on Avenue J, you saw somebody die? You'd have nightmares. You talk about it for 3 days, and then you'd go on with life. That's not what Herschel Weber did. Herschel Weber went and learned first aid. He got 2 guys with him, and he got a tank. And then the Eibishter said, you know something, Herschel? You're the man. You cared, and I'm going to give you the schus of Hatzalas Nefashos of thousands around the world. You could fly and you could soar if you'll only open the door. Yaakov Chweki opened the door to that couple. The Satmar Rebbe opened the door, and Herschel Weber opened the door to the Satmar Rebbe's house, and that's how things happened. You can't just sit back and let life pass you by. That's not what life is all about. Just to have a Riach Hashanim. That's not what the Eibishter brought you in this world for. Every one of us has to think, what am I doing for other people in Klal Yisrael? That's how you bring out your best. Look into your heart. Every one of us has talent. I don't have to be like you, you don't have to be like me, and both of us don't have to be like him. I mean, he's not here now, so we could talk about him. I'm sure he would blush like anything. Think about Elazar Bald. He's been doing shiurim, 20 years, right? Simcha, how many years has he been doing shiurim? Closer to 30. How old is he today? He's probably 40, so he's doing it since he's 10, right? He was a young kid when he started making these shiurim. I couldn't believe it. In Flatbush, and Williamsburg, and summer, and winter, and daytime, Cholamoid, and then he starts in all countries, in all cities. He was in his 20s. And in Margaret's Torah like that, it's unbelievable. He was a guy who felt he had an idea, and he went and he did it, and he changed the world. That's absolutely incredible. And that's what we have to learn from. You cannot be shy. We each have talents. And one day we're going to be Mon, the Eibishter is going to ask us, what'd you do in this world? What did you accomplish? So you became a millionaire, but what'd you do with it? It's not only about you. It's what you do for other people. I want to tell you about 2 people who changed our lives. And you might not realize that they were public school kids. I'm very close to both of them. Their names are Shimon and Reuven Kol Yaakov. They started TorahAnytime.com. Now, today, TorahAnytime.com is a household word. Last year, over 12 million hours were learned throughout the world because of these 2 guys. Let me tell you how they started. Bukharian boys, they came to America, they were in public school. And you know, there's a wonderful organization called JEP. And what JEP does is they go into the public schools and they have classes that they give to these kids. They take them out for an hour or whatever of class, and they're able to teach them some Torah. So whoever it was in Jep in those years in Forest Hills, he comes into Forest Hills High School, and he sees two kids. He finds out that they're Jewish, Kol Yaakov. He says, would you like to hear some Torah? There's a rabbi going to give a lecture. Nah, we're not interested. No, they're serving pizza. Oh, pizza. Okay, we'll go. So they went. Whoever that rabbi was, I don't know who he was. He should be benched forever. But he inspired them that they decided next week, if they serve pizza again, they're going to come. And they started coming. Every week they came to that Jeb class. I'm sure in the beginning they didn't have yarmulkes, obviously. And they came. And then Shimon told me that he decided, I really want to review what this rabbi says. So he had a little cassette tape recorder, and he started recording. And then he said, I'm going to send this out to some of my friends. This is good stuff. My friends are not religious. They should hear about this. And then he started taking a little video camera. And he started videoing different people that were giving lectures. And one day he comes over to me. We were at a Shabbaton. Zachariah Wallerstein, Shalom made a Shabbaton. I happened to be one of the speakers there, and they were there. Not as a speaker, they were just listening with their parents. I still remember on Shabbos, he comes over to me and he says, Rabbi Krohn, would you mind, there's a lot of people that are becoming speakers these days. Would you mind if we came and videoed you, and then we would send it out to other places? I said, of course you could video. He says, you think it'll work? We want to send it out to a lot of... I said, of course it'll work. He says, but everybody's telling us that there's no way we can do it. I said, don't be ridiculous. Michael Rothschild from the Chavetz Chaim Heritage Foundation, he makes these recordings, and tens of thousands of people see it every Tisha B'Av. We have over here, right, Mr. Einsteiner, right? Doesn't your son, Hofstadter, doesn't your son make recordings also on the parasha, and he sends them out? So here, there's two guys from public school, and they send it out all over the world. Now, if I speak, no matter where I speak, and if they're recording it, by the next day, it's across the universe. And today, you could follow anybody. There are so many great speakers on that program of Torah Anytime. And if you don't use the internet, they have a telephone access number. A telephone, you could hear it on telephone. You don't have to have the internet. People are like Noach Isaac Oldbaum, like Moshe Tuvia Leaf. I mean, it's unbelievable who's on there. Men, women, Rabbonim, Askonim, tremendous, tremendous. Anybody can listen, literally, men and women, to public school kids. If they could do it, what should we say about ourselves? And I'll tell you another person that changed all our lives that you might even not realize. I remember when I was in Camp Aguda many, many years ago. So there was a fellow there who was a great artist. He was a lefty. And every year they wanted him to be the artist on Color Wall because nobody could draw a banner as good as Meir Zlotowitz. He was a great artist. And what happened was he had a friend in camp, also a wild guy just like him, Mayor Fogel. These two mayors were inseparable. And then they went on, after camp, they went to yeshivas or whatever. Eventually, they both got married. Rachmana litzlan, Mayor Fogel, was married a short time. He had a massive heart attack and he died. Never had any children. And in 1976, Meir Zlotowitz decided that he wants to write a parish on Megillas Esther, and he'll do it l'zecher nishmas, his friend Meir Fogel, and give it out to people. And like this, they'll be able to learn on Purim about Megillas Esther. He'll make a nice commentary. And like this, it'll be a schus for his neshama, his friend's neshama. But before he gave it out, he wanted to ask people if it was really worthy of giving out. So he showed it to Rabbi David Cohen. So Rabbi David said to him, you can't give this out. It's fabulous. You got to print it. The whole world has to see this. He said, what do you mean print it? I'm not a printer. Feldheim is a printer. He said, you have a company? He said, yeah. What's your company? Well, I do artwork, so it's called art, and I drew a manuscript, so it's called scroll, art scroll. So he said, print it on the art scroll, and that's how art scroll started. Tonight, when you go home, take a look at the Megillas Esther, you'll see this story right in the beginning, in 1976, when Meir Fogel passed away. One man. Is there anybody here, any Yid in the world that speaks English that doesn't have an art scroll sefer? A chumash, a machzer, a siddur, Shas, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Mishnayos, a Maggid book. Everybody's got something, right? One man, Meir Zlotowitz, and then he got Nassim Sherman, Yibad L'chaim, to write an overview, and they changed the world. I remember a number of years ago, I had a certain problem. I went to Rab Nassim Sherman. I asked him to daven for me. He said, "You asking me?" I said, "Rab Nassim, is there a bigger Marbus Torah than Art Scroll in this universe?" All over the world, wherever you go. One guy, two guys. I think Nassim Sherman was born in Newark, New Jersey. We're not talking Rab Shlomo Zalman here. We're not talking Rab Elyasher. We're not talking Rab Moshe. We're talking about two American boys who had a talent and went with it. And that's what we have to think about tonight on Rosh Chodesh Elul. The Eibishter bench you. Don't sit back. You know, I once heard a great thing that the word creation and the word reaction, write it down, you'll see how the same letters. Creation and reaction. Every one of us in life has to decide, are you a person of reaction or are you a person of creation? Most of us are reaction. We let everybody else do the work and then we respond. You can't be that way. You got to be a person of creation. Think about it. Take a walk with yourself. Talk to yourself. And think about what talent did the Eibishter give you that you could do something for other people. And how do you do it? I'll tell you one of the ways. Hang around good, accomplished people. Don't hang around these people that are eating beef jerkies in McAllen. Don't hang around these, I don't want to say what, because I'm in a Beis Medrash. These people who go to Kiddush clubs on Shabbos. Shrek l'cha b'zoyin, a Kiddush club. Davtach shemen. In those shuls that they have a Kiddush club before Musaf. What kind of chinuch is that for children? Achman al-Itzlan. That's what shul is? You go drink before Musaf? You got to be out of your mind. You got to be out of your mind to do it, and you got to be even crazier to do it in front of your kids. What do you think your kids are going to be like? That's not what those are not the friends that you should have. You should have friends that accomplish things. You should have friends that give you encouragement. Friends that build you. Friends that think that you could accomplish. And I'll tell you something amazing. Something that Rav Hutner wrote to a Talmud in Pachad Yitzchak. In one of the letters, Ois Kuf Kof Ches, number 128. And he writes like this. There's a mistaken tendency to focus on our great Torah leaders in their mature years. In doing so, we skip the years of struggle to become great, as if they emerged from birth as accomplished scholars and tzaddikim. In English expression, you lose the battle, but you win the war. Surely you're going to fail, and you have failed. But I assure you, you will emerge with the crown of victory on your head. And Rab Nassim Sherman writes in a book that Art Scroll printed on Bar Mitzvah, failure is not the enemy of success, it's the prerequisite. Great people were not born, they were made. They made themselves great through desire and effort and by failing, by learning from their failures and refusing to submit to them. We have somebody here, I don't want to embarrass him, who went through a difficult time and lost the business that was successful because for whatever reason other people got involved. And people thought it's the end. And just the opposite. The failure of that business led him to the great success that he is today. Talking about Morty Melman and the FJJ. He had a different business. But look what he accomplished. Who doesn't read the FJJ? Teaches Torah, teaches history. It's entertaining. And it's geschmack. And people love it. And this is a person who could have given up because he had a success before, but then it failed. But that failure brought tremendous success. Don't worry if you fail. You just keep on going, and that's how you become great. Let's review very quickly, and we'll end with a great thought from Rav Hutner and a great story. Let's remember what we said. The Bava Rebbe said, even if a person had a great year, Oila, you got to go higher. And if Chas v'Shalom, the year was not so great as far as our Ruchnius, so Echad L'Chatas, we have to try to improve. But tonight is the night to improve. And as we said, we remember Pinchas Horowitz Zatzal Deracham Shrifka Rebbe, Rabbi Mitnick, all these great people who we lost this past year. We have to realize nobody lives forever. And it's not a question of Arichas Shonim, it's a question of Arichas Yomim, trying to accomplish. If one letter is missing, Yisrael, Yeshishim Ribi Oises Later, if one letter is missing, the whole Klal Yisrael is flawed. There's no overlap. Each one of us is special, but we can't do it alone. We need somebody else. And as we said, the Imri Yema said about the Sfas Emes, he may not have had Arichas Shonim, but he had Arichas Yomim, and we could all strive for that. You can strive, you can fly and you can soar if you'll only open the door as Yaakov Chweki did. As Roger Bannister, he didn't believe anybody when they said he can't run the mile in less than 4 minutes. He did it, and within a year, 37 other people did it, and next year, 100 people did it, because they believed in themselves. Let's remember Herschel Weber. Siddim Gehart, when he saw somebody die, and what happened? Look, he helped start Atzola through the Satmar Rebbe, because the Eibishter gave him the schus. Elazar Ball, the young man in his 20s, shiurim all around the world, because he believed in himself, and he believes in himself, and Simcha Deutsch as well deserves tremendous credit for everything that they do. Shimon and Reuven, Kol Yaakov, TorahAnytime.com, Meir Zlotowitz, Art Scroll. We may not accomplish something on their scale, but we could accomplish on our own scales. Hang around good people, don't be worried about failing. And just remember this fabulous, fabulous vort from Rav Hutner. Rav Hutner once said, the Medrash tells us, Vayar Elokim es kol asher osa v'hinei toiv ma'oid, in Bereshis Aleph, Lamed Aleph. Bereshis Rabbah in the Medrash on this pasuk, Bereshis Rabbah Tes Yud Beis says, Ma'oid is Adam. So what does that mean? Any child, if you tell them the word Ma'oid, tell them to mix around the letters, they'll come up with Adam. What's the muvan here? So Rav Hutner, everything in life can be measured. The distance from here to the sun can be measured. The distance from here to the bottom of the ocean can be measured. The only thing that can't be measured is the potential in man. Adam is Ma'oid. You could accomplish anything if you believe it. And if you believe it, you'll be able to accomplish it. I just want to end with this story. Now, I may have told the story. I'm sure that some of you know it. But it is such a great story, and it is literally a life-changing story. A number of years ago in Lakewood, they decided that they're going to close the Chadorim a few days before the Yontif of Pesach. So like this, the young Rebbes will be able to help the wives preparing for Yontif. So Vahi Hayom, it's a couple days before Yontif, and a 5th grade Rebbe comes in to the kitchen, and he says to his wife, is there any way that I can help you? She says, you want to help? He says, yeah, I'll do whatever you say. He says, you look, Baruch Hashem, we have 6 children. If you could take the kids out of the house for 4 hours, I'll be able to bake, cook, and clean. It'll be wonderful. And he's thinking, what's he going to do with the kids for 4 hours in Lakewood? But he realizes that Newark Airport is an hour away, so he figures he's going to go to Newark Airport. It's an hour one way. He'll come back an hour back, so at least, that's 2 hours. He goes to Newark Airport, and he remembers that there's such a thing called an air train. An air train goes from terminal to terminal. I'm telling you, the airports are monstrous. I was in a number of countries this week, Spain, Gibraltar, Morocco, Canada, whatever. The airports are monstrous. So you have to go by train from one terminal to the other. You land in Delta, you got to go to United or to American, whatever. So these kids were never in an airport. They were never on an air train. And they're going from terminal to terminal, and in Newark, it goes near the runway. You can see the planes taking off and landing. It goes over the Jersey Turnpike. Kids are having a ball. After 2 hours, a pilot gets on. Spiffy-looking guy with a uniform and a tie and a cap or whatever. And these pilots, most of them are wonderful, wonderful guys. And he sees a father with 6 kids. He goes over to one of the kids and he says, where you all flying today? They didn't know what to say, where they're flying. So they look at the father. And the father says to the pilot, well, we're actually flying nowhere. He says, nowhere? He says, you see, we're Jewish and we have a religious holiday that's coming up and it's very busy. So my wife asked me if I could take care of the kids. And we're just having a great time together on this air train. We're just having a wonderful time together. And the pilot got very serious. And he said, young man, I want to tell you something. He said, I've been a pilot for 25 years. There's not a major airport in the world that I haven't landed in. 2 years ago, I got a text from my son. He said, Dad, you're always so busy. You never have time. You never came to any of my birthday parties. You didn't even come to my graduation. And last week, you didn't even have the decency to come to my son, your first grandson's birthday party. Do me a favor. Take my number out of your contacts. And then he said, 2 weeks later, I got the same text from my daughter. He said, young man, I have flown everywhere, but obviously gone nowhere. You told me you're flying nowhere, but with your kids, you're going everywhere. And that's the final lesson tonight. See, a grandfather brings his grandchildren here. That's where it's all about. The future of Klal Yisrael are your children. No matter what you're involved in, there's nothing more important than your children and grandchildren. That's how you bring out the best in your family. Because if you don't bring out the best in your kids, chas v'shalom, somebody else is going to. If you don't validate your kids and spend time with them, somebody else will. I remember I once went to Rabbi Shlomo Volba, and I asked him, I said, I have the opportunity to speak about chinuch. What should I tell parents? He said, tell every parent there's two things they got to give their children. Time and love. Time and love. And my son Avram Zelik was there, so he asked Rav Shlomo Zalman, he said, how much time do I have to give my kids? And Rav Shlomo Zalman said the classic answer. He said, as much as they need. And that's what we have to do. Make sure you have shaychus with your children and grandchildren before it's too late. And bring out the best in yourselves and the best in your families. And if we could do that this Rosh Chodesh Elul, in Echad L'Oila ve'Echad L'Chatas, then Mitzvah Hashem next year, Igor Shir Torah will be able to have this in Binyanei Oma and Yerushalayim and HaKodesh. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you.
Shem Irgen Shir Torah Moses Boston. I'd like to give a big Yashar Koyach, Rabbi Krohn, for the inspiring drasha. Rabbi said one way you can bring out the best in yourself and in others is by sponsoring a shir Irgen Shir Torah, putting an ad in the dinner journal, an occasion of Irgen Shir Torah's annual dinner next Wednesday, and have a chelik and a batzas Torah, the rabbim of Irgen Shir Torah worldwide throughout the year. Call Irgen Shir Torah 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. I'd like to give a big Yashar Koyach to Anonymous for sponsoring tonight's shares of Schus V'Atzlocha B'chol Inyanim. I'd like to give a big Yashar Koyach to Mr. and Mrs. Alti Freilach for sponsoring tonight's share. Yashar Koyach to everyone for coming. Ram Chananya ben Akash Emer Osa HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakis Es Yisrael Afik Rehibelim Torah Mitzvah Shenema Adonai Chofetz Aman Tzidkoi Yagdil Torah V'Yader.